All right, welcome to this week's episode of I Spit on Your Podcast, the only horror podcast where in our inaugural episode the host doesn't introduce the rest of the cast. So I will introduce you to Tyler, Sexy Stubble Ebert. We have Sean, Ironjaw Restinowski, and myself is Justin. This may be the only week my beard is better than the rest, Marylander.
You did get really lucky.
This week we journeyed into Stephen King's The Mist. Immediately, first thing I loved, A+ horror references right in the beginning of the movie. Our main character, David, seems to be making movie posters. There's a Thing poster that he presumably painted, as well as a reference to the Dark Tower series with the gunslinger. So my initial thoughts on this is what I liked about this movie is going through, it's got a good build to suspense in the start. They're outside viewing the destruction of the storm, and it leads to, a little interaction between rival neighbors and the son Billy pointing out that there's a mist rolling over the lake. Seems like nothing, but apparently is everything. So we've got this good suspense build by you see these military and first responders showing up, kind of what you would think just to be, a disaster relief showing up. Oh, okay, this crazy storm happened, so people are coming in to wreak havoc. And then the military rolls by and more military rolls by. And okay, that's kind of odd. A big thunderstorm or whatever goes by, you don't see this crazy relief. The mist rolls through and the guy comes running in. There's something in the mist, but you don't know what's in the mist. Is it a bigger storm? Is it like a hurricane? You don't understand that it's monsters. So there's this kind of nice slow build to a suspense that leaves you kind of guessing what it is rather than just being told, hey, there's monsters in the mist.
I definitely want to acknowledge what you're talking about building tension, that kind of rising action. I'm actually going to level with you guys. This is not a movie that I enjoy watching, and it's actually for a couple of reasons. None of which being that the movie's bad, because I don't think it is. One of the reasons is that this is just one of my weird little quirks. I do not like disaster movies. They make me really uncomfy. And then number two is that I found that for a monster movie, some of the deaths were so damn dark. Some of them are a little mean-spirited. Monster movies are definitely supposed to be fun. I feel like that's one of the number one priorities of a monster movie. And there's a lot of scenes in this movie where it stops being fun, where I just feel sad and nervous.
It's very dark and it's very real. But one thing I'll kind of get into, I think we'll discuss bigger, is this really a monster movie? Or is there just a threat of monsters in this other movie?
Monsters in the Mist. Who are the real monsters? Are the monsters outside or are they in the grocery store? As soon as the mist starts to hit and everybody gets a little, upset about it, it turns into in my opinion, a dick measuring contest. And I know that is the most realistic thing that's going to happen, so I can't fault this movie for doing it. But I think
classic, same thing as zombie movies.
Right, but that right there is the most unsettling thing to me, that in a disaster or in the unknown, people will act like this.
I think you're right. I think that was the intention. I think that the intention of the movie when it comes to your active threats in a movie, I believe that it is the people inside amongst themselves. And I think that the monsters outside are more of a set design. It's more of a facilitator, much like how zombies are used in most zombie movies.
I almost, in a weird way, feel like the outside monsters are puppeting the inside monsters, because they're giving them fuel and fire and helping them do what they're doing. I don't have the character names.
This is very, very interesting because I feel the other way around.
Really?
Yeah.
Along with the great build to suspense, there's also really good character development from the start. Last week we were talking about Storm Warning and how poor we thought character growth and development was. And then going into this, watching, 20 minutes in, I've already know so much about so many characters. Like the big chunk is how these people in this convenience store interact with each other and deal with each other. That if you don't have this dynamic of their interaction, this whole movie falls apart, basically.
Yeah, the dynamic between David and Brent is surprisingly good for a movie of this genre. The way that I interpreted it is that they are guys who, due to circumstances that may or may not have been under their control, they don't get along, but they kind of, I almost get the vibe that they wish they did. Like, nobody wants an enemy instead of a friend. And I think that comes through a little bit, that they both maybe are a little too proud to say it out loud, or maybe it's a little too awkward, but it kind of seems like both of them wish it wasn't like this between them, at least in the beginning, before things flare up under the stress.
It seems like they're so quick to try to reconcile their differences. You know, he takes him into town and he's like shopping with his son and all that. They're so quick to be like, oh, okay. And then, you know, once Norm dies, he's like, you know, I actually believed you were being nice to me for a minute. And
oh, that broke my heart. There's a couple like really genuinely sad scenes in this movie that don't even necessarily involve a death or anything. That was the first scene where I went, that interesting relationship was set up enough to the point where I was really beginning to ship that friendship.
They were together for maybe 12 minutes of screen time, but in movie time, you know, we'll say maybe an hour because they had to go in town and drive. And they really, truly, honestly gave each other respect, were very nice to one another. They weren't patronizing. They weren't belittling. They weren't anything each other. You know, he allowed Brent to walk inside holding Billy's hand. And then it like just everything washed away and everything was gone so fast. And in my opinion, it was pathetic. Like there was no, it was written in because of their history.
But it kind of made sense though, because David and Myron and whoever it is go through what they go through. And he comes back to Brent, who's very much this realist. He immediately comes out and tells him and says, oh, there's like basically aliens and monsters. And he's just like, you're out of your mind. You know, he's just such a realist that
which is fair at first.
No, it's not. I completely disagree with both of you right now. Okay. He's a realist, but you had bloody clothes. Where did the blood come from? Why didn't he take him into the back? They only brought the manager back there to show them the tentacle and all the blood.
Refused to go back.
And third of all, they heard screaming. When everybody ran out, they heard screaming, and a guy came into the store screaming and bloodied, saying something was going on. So it's not like they're just saying, hey, let's pull one over on Brent. Let's fuck him up. There have been signs that something is not right.
I think it's really dumb of Brent to when a grown man is telling you, hey, 20 feet that way, I have literal physical proof sitting on the floor. Just let me show you. Very, very dumb that he wouldn't go just look at it.
Unless he's extremely afraid because they went in with Norm, didn't come out. He might be worried that this guy doesn't like me. They're going to take me back there and kill me next.
That's such a logical leap. I mean, remember, at the point where this happens, the situation isn't that bad yet. It's not like the shit hasn't really hit the fan. It's ridiculous. David would be using this opportunity to pull a prank on him. Also, David's like 35 years old. He's not pulling a prank. Like, who pranks people like that? Like, oh, I saw this thing past 20 years old.
I can understand, you know, maybe, oh shit, there's something going on, but these people might be up to something. But take a step back. You know, you're jumping to way crazy conclusions. You're not even admitting to yourself that things aren't like that. Things have been fine. They've been cordial, civil, and very respectful to one another.
I agree with you both in the fact that it was really dumb for him to think that he would be pranking him at a time like this. Like, obviously, that would be ridiculous. And it's also extremely stupid to not go back there and just to see the evidence. But understanding his character and his nature, I could totally see where someone goes, hey, man, we were just down there and we opened the door to let Norm out and tentacles came out and grabbed him and pulled him away.
Yeah,
I believe. If he told me that, I'd go, think something might be going on in your head right now. You're a little stressed out. I wouldn't jump to interdimensional monsters with tentacles, you know? I mean, that would totally catch me off guard if someone said, hey, we just saw tentacles come through the door.
I completely understand what you're saying, but at the same time, also remember too, when everybody ran out of the store when the mist was hitting, everybody started screaming and nobody heard any cars starting, any cars going, any noise, anything like that. So you would kind of not think that there's interdimensional monsters out there, but something's clearly out there if they can't get their cars going and they're not leaving. And that military Jeep is still out front and all this stuff is kind of building up. So I would at least think that a reasonable person would say, tentacles came out? What the fuck come on, what are you saying? And go see, go check.
I love how undefined and Lovecraftian the threat is in the beginning of this movie, and I hate how tangible it is in the end. I would have loved to have seen less of the monsters. I think that some of the worst scenes in the movie are when the monsters are full screen, but I feel like there is potential for a better movie there, where they kind of pull a little bit of a Blair Witch and you don't see tentacles. You don't see giant cicadas.
I agree with you a little bit there, Tyler. I personally, watching it too, I thought they kind of gave us too many monsters. Kind of like I mentioned last week with the storm warning, with the isolation shots. You did a really good job showing some, but then you just kept going with it and you kind of lost what you had built.
I think that Lovecraft and the Cthulhu universe was a huge influence for King when he wrote this. And if one of the only really major monster on-screen scenes had been the tentacles that kill Norm, I mean, what's more Lovecraft than tentacles?
And the monster at the end walking through with the tentacles on its side too. If those are the only two images, those were like perfect.
I specifically wrote in my notes verbatim. I said CGI holds up well enough, but doesn't look modern. That's what I wrote. For 2007, it's valiant.
Yeah, just like you said last week, Tyler, with the overdone blood fan CGI. It's the decade it's in. It's things aren't going to look like they do now, and it's just something that it's tough for guys like us to really kind of look past. It's hard to be modern, watch something old, and look past the fact that it's not to what we're used to seeing now.
So while watching this movie, there's definitely an emphasis on character progression and character setup, and that never is that more noticeable than in the emotional roller coaster that I was sent on by a relatively minor character by the name of Jim. Jim is played by William Sadler. If you read through his IMDb page, it's legit. Bill and Ted, Shawshank Redemption, Iron Man 3, Die Hard 2, The Green Mile. I mean, the guy's legit, right? I thought he was great in this movie in terms of acting. And I have more notes with the name Jim in them than any other name. The first note I have on Jim is, what the hell is Jim's problem? Because he comes at David guns a-blazing for absolutely no fucking reason. He doesn't believe anything about what's going on in the back room with the generator. He berates David for thinking that they should show some caution with going outside. He pressures Norm into going outside, leading to his death. The next note that I have on Jim is that he does his best to apologize, which is rare in movies. He says many, many times, I would say literally 6 or 7 times, he says, I'm sorry about Norm. I'm sorry about Norm. I'm sorry about the kid. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know? And I was like, okay, Jim kind of won me over. It's noteworthy that he's the one name I know at this point. So I'm developing this relationship with Jim, right? I like Jim. He survives way more of the movie than you would expect based on the way his character is introduced. So now I'm like, okay, this is like one of the final dudes of the movie. Next note I have after that in all capital letters is, Jim, you traitor, I'm so hurt. Because he becomes one of the religious fanatics. And so his character arc was really interesting, and it really, really gripped me. He hurt me personally. He made me feel betrayal. He introduced himself as this bad character. He won me over the course of a large chunk of the movie, and then he took it all away from me. The gym experience is going to be a big part of the memory of watching this movie.
One of my character of choice that I went to wasn't a main. Well, maybe he was a main character, but it was Ollie.
Yeah.
I loved Ollie.
I ain't stupid. I know it was going to be Ollie.
It was the 45-year-old bag boy who told his manager to shut the fuck up and just grabbed the gun and just went guns blazing. Death was the biggest bullshit of this movie. You gave me such a strong, great supporting character, and you just write them off when they run out into the mist. Ollie was the man. I'm pouring one out to my man Ollie because he deserved better than what he got.
Another thing I really enjoy about this movie and a lot of horror movies in general that do this is it's very multifaceted horror. It's not, just kind of one genre of horror. It kind of has all these different categories in it. Like I specifically wrote, environmental horror, people versus people horror, monster, and almost survival horror at times too. There's a giant storm that destroys everything, leading people to this moment, as well as obviously the mist itself. Obviously, the people versus people. I will get into that later. I won't touch it now. Obviously, there's giant monsters in the mist. And survival. All these people have to go through these crazy extremes to try to survive, finding things to eat, trying to obtain medicine from other places, and just going through basic daily life. I wrote this down. I thought Sean would enjoy this, that people actually make smart decisions in this movie. Starting first with, hey, the entire front of this store is made of glass. Maybe we should barricade it. Also, they don't force run the generator even though it stinks. They decide, it's getting backed up. We'll just deal without having electricity. And the attention to detail, I thought, also is incredible in this. Like, so many times I feel like I've watched movies where people are pulling rope and it gets pulled out of their hands and they have these iron hands where nothing burns, but immediately as it starts to pull, they're gritting their teeth and, you can tell that it's burning their hands.
And the old lady hands him like a handkerchief.
Yeah, she hands it that, and Ollie's grabbing like his apron to start pulling on it as well. So that, and in that same scene when they're trying to pull the rope back, you see their shoes like skidding the floor and actually leaving marks on the floor. Just like little details that are, overlooked and don't mean much, but it's kind of cool to see like actual things like that being done and paid attention to. It almost plays off more like it's a real scenario that you're witnessing as opposed to you're watching this movie.
I think the best decision and the smartest decision of the entire movie, they didn't make a big deal and show off the fact that they had a gun. They were secretive about it and they held it to themselves. Because if people would have found out that they had a gun, it would have been mass hysteria or they would have had people try and get it. But they tried to keep it quiet because they knew this is not the type of environment to have it. Let's just keep it to ourselves.
I had one counterpoint to them being really smart, making smart decisions, is they clearly did not think that fire plan through very well. Where, if there's one fire accident, we just blew our entire shelter, and now we have to venture into this mist. You would think, hey, the one thing we don't want to do right now is light this place on fire, but let's screw around with like gasoline and mops and torches. It led to a unnecessary death of, I think his name was Bobby. It almost was like this fire incident was just to drive the point for, okay, we need to get them to need to go to the pharmacy somehow. So let's have a fire accident where this dude gets burned up and needs antibiotics.
I think that just the use of fire in general is distinctly barbaric in its aesthetic, and I feel like it mirrors their descent into more barbaric means quite nicely.
Yeah, it is a very good point. It makes lots of sense. They actually create legitimate reasons for like continuously going out into the mist. They're not just one after another saying, "Fuck it, I'm gonna go into the mist." Okay, that died. That guy just died 2 hours later. Okay, let me try again. They need to go out into the pharmacy. The beginning, the woman's trying to get her children. They create real. Other than Brent's group, who's just like, "Fuck it, we're out of here."
And the
Uh,
biker.
well, but the biker goes out for the shotgun. He
But
goes out for a reason.
you think that's I didn't think that was a good reason. I thought that was a half-assed reason, and I feel like he's very observant. So for his character to be that type of person, for him to just go out and walk into the mist, I thought that was kind of meh.
He's not necessarily going out to get the shotgun for himself. He's more doing it for everyone else. He's kind of that self-sacrificial lamb. Like, hey, I'm gonna try to help you. This is my role. I'll do what I can. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Wouldn't that cause more issues though? If you brought one gun into an environment where there's maybe 50, 60 people, wouldn't that become an issue? Wouldn't people fight over it and who gets it?
It could definitely become a source of contention.
I know if I were stuck in that convenience store and there's the potential to go get a shotgun to fight monsters, I'd probably want that shotgun. If someone's going to offer to try and go get it, I'm going to say, all right, well, it's better use to us in here than it is out there.
Just think about the knives that were in the store, in the shop, and how maybe there was 4 or 5 knives divvied up, and look what happened to them. They got used on a soldier, on Jessup, and he had no way to fight back. That's the reason why I think it's a bad idea. That's why I would prefer not to have it, because you put that power in one person's hand, and they make all the decisions, and they can decide to shoot you or sacrifice you, send you outside, do anything. And I don't like that. I don't like giving one person, where we're all equals, I don't like giving one of those people the upper hand, because you don't know what they're thinking in this type of environment. Then you want the gun to be in somebody's neutral's hands. But what my main thing is, there's nobody that's just neutral. At some point, everybody's looking out for themselves.
But I don't think if you gave it to that neutral person, I think they're going to very much stick to the fact that they're going to use that gun for the monsters and the monsters only. They're not going to start turning it on people just because they have a gun. I mean, shit, Amanda had the gun and she didn't go, well, now I have the power. I can start pointing it at people. One thing I really disliked about this movie, and I'm sure you guys noticed it too, I really hated the fade to black scene transitions. Seems so much like it's fading out and then we're fading back in. They look corny and cheesy.
I had very few notes referring to the technical parts of filmmaking in this. One of the only shots in the movie that actually stuck out to me as an interesting shot, when Jessup is getting fed out that window and it's like the top-down shot, it looks pretty cool. But that's the only shot-related note I had.
I had one production-related note. I didn't chase this rabbit hole like I wanted to, but I did hear that this movie originally was supposed to be released in black and white and not color. And there are some still shots of it that look absolutely amazing. And truthfully, I think that this movie would have been a little bit better if it was black and white and not color.
Yeah, I was reading that today too. It was supposed to kind of be like a nice tribute along the lines of Night of the Living Dead, whatnot, which kind of plays into Tyler's whole zombie thing. Like the monsters aren't really the important part here; it's the people. If you're really interested in seeing it, I'm pretty sure they said on the 2008 Blu-ray release, the black and white copy is on there. There are some pretty sweet horror imagery moments though, like when Norm's getting pulled out from under the trailer and you're kind of at level with him as opposed to looking down. When they're pulling the rope back from the biker guy and it's just rope, and then it's gut rope, just kind of going. I thought that was really cool as well, which is nice to include in your horror movie, something that you can easily call back to. I liked the David character as the main character leader. I thought he was a pretty strong leader. He obviously has his flaws, but I feel like he continues to learn from them as he goes.
I hate to be disappointing, but I pretty much agree.
I don't hate to disappoint because I didn't like him.
Yeah, I figured that was coming. I knew if anyone was going to disagree, it'd be Sean.
I don't feel like he's somebody that I would want to, go with. He kind of just seems like another average Joe just plugging along, which is why it's almost disappointing to me that the movie does censor him and make him the main character or make the movie about him.
Was the movie really about him, though? I don't think he was in the spotlight at all. Brent was in the spotlight. Jim was in the spotlight. The religious lady was in the spotlight. I feel like David was the lens through which we experience events. He was the audience. He's not influencing events, really. He's kind of going with the flow, doing his best. The movie kind of happens to him.
He was clearly trying to take charge at one point when he was telling everybody about Norm's death and what was going on.
I think that his character is intentionally fairly innocuous. He doesn't have super strong character traits. He isn't this bullheaded, stubborn jackass like Brent. He's not this religious nut job. He's a very average character that the purpose of his character is that you make him the main character so that his experience is a window for the audience.
If that's what it was, that's fine. But I still wouldn't want to hitch, my trailer to him, because what does he do? Being an average Joe and another person in an otherwise chaotic situation?
Exactly. Not being one of the psychopaths.
I think psychopath's a little far for everybody. Okay, I think that in this situation where they're all at, it's not fair to call one person out for their strong beliefs or their, where they want to go. I don't think it's totally fair to say they're a psychopath, because if they weren't in the situation, they wouldn't be making the decisions they are.
So you think that David is equally as bad as Carmody, who is using humans as sacrifices to appease God, basically?
I think that you made the point that Jessup was the face of the military and everybody blamed him for this event happening. And I 110% believe that if the three of us were sitting our asses in that store and there was military people and they kind of admitted or slightly admitted, yeah, we've been doing testing and this happened, we would all get pissed the fuck off and kick them the fuck out. They have changed our world. They have brought danger to us. We would absolutely have an issue with it.
I would have an issue. I wouldn't necessarily say I'd kick them out. I think they could have very useful information. No, I'm not saying he's going to live as one of us. I'm obviously going to isolate him, but he clearly has information regarding what is happening.
I'm not surprised that people stabbed him. I'm not surprised at all. He withheld information. I don't blame them for getting angry and taking it out on him.
Nobody in this movie gets what they deserve. This situation is cruel and unusual punishment for everybody in this movie, with the single possible exception of the religious lady. I can't think of another character in this movie that deserves what happens to them. I don't think that Jessup is lying about not being involved with the actual project itself. He's pretty low level, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's just a grunt. I think that it's pretty obvious that he just had heard in passing the name of this project and vaguely what it was about. I think that when Jessup saw what was going on, it reminded him of an experiment that he had heard about through the grapevine and thought, oh, fuck, this might be that. I don't think that the Mist had anything whatsoever to do with any military experience. The religious woman who is inarguably, objectively painted as the villain for this entire movie, you cannot point to a single line of dialogue that comes out of her mouth that doesn't end up being true. She is right about every single thing she says. Her idea that this could be the wrath of an angry Old Testament God, it would explain why the buzzcut woman survived when she went out in the mist to find her children. You could argue it being some kind of purity of heart, purity of intentions, whatever. It would also explain why all of the characters in this movie that you can really objectively point to being good dudes, they all survive and get into that car. The only exception being Ollie. I think he should have made it, but again, I blame writing more than the universe of the film for that. Is it would explain why you seem to see a mirror between how bad things are going on in the store among the people and how vicious the attacks are from outside. And Sean, this was something that I teased a bit earlier because Sean made the observation that it seemed like the worse the attacks got, the worse it made the people inside. And I said, I think it's the exact opposite. I totally 100% think that this is religious in nature. I know that the movie's kind of intentionally set up so that no theory is proven, and I think that there's enough circumstantial evidence to at least support it, if not necessarily prove it. It also explains why the mist clears immediately following the ultimate sacrifice. That's why I don't necessarily see the ending as tragic as some people do. I don't believe that if they had just waited one more minute, the mist would have cleared. I don't think it would have. I think that it reacted to David's actions.
What if David is a parallel to Abraham, and his mercy kill of Billy is looked at as Abraham's sacrifice of Isaac? The whole movie, it kind of seems like these ramblings are a little just like off to the left, and then you start to see them come more true and true and true, and things line up with them. Not saying that they don't line up with a science experiment gone wrong, because they do, but there's no real concrete evidence of that science experiment gone wrong. I find that to be a little harder to believe than the whole religious aspect. I 100% think that it is more of a religious thing than anything. And how Carmody, she had that bug on her chest, and she just gave herself to God, and it just flew away. Whereas in every other case, it attacked. Sally, the girl at the register, the babysitter for Billy, her and Jessup had a little bit of a sexual moment. She offered her desires for him. She said that she wanted him and she liked him, showing lust. And then in the very next scene, when those wasp things attack, she was killed. And then, of course, you have the whole Jessup sacrifice. And, he's thrown out and everything's calm and everything's fine. You have Carmody die, and all of a sudden there's another attack on the group that's leaving. I want to say about 4 of them are killed in the parking lot, if I'm not mistaken. And then you have the obvious ending of the movie, where I 100% agree. I don't think that they're just going to sit there on E for 15 minutes, look around, all of a sudden the tank is going to come and everything is going to clear up. I don't think that anything was going to do it except for that sacrifice that was mentioned earlier in the movie.
I don't think necessarily that I'm on one side of the fence or the other, that it's a science experiment or that it's certainly for sure a religious event. But I think there's 100% way more evidence for the latter. But I just think the portrayal of religious figures in this movie is interesting overall. It's just, this obviously takes a very kind of extreme portrayal here. They kind of want you to see Carmody as this crazy person or cult leader almost, the way she's getting people to follow her. I wrote, was she right the whole time? Like you said, Tyler, everything she mentioned basically, happened. At the very end, she wanted Amanda and Billy to be their sacrifice, and events carry on, and by the time the boy dies, things clear up. I just think there's not enough to make a science argument here. I think you guys make great points in that it's it's hard to discredit the fact that this was kind of a religious event. I think going into this, we expected to have this huge debate on this point, but going through and watching it, like I said, there's just not necessarily evidence that really points the other way. Is this trying to make a religious statement, or is this trying to explain interactions between groups of people?
I think that we're, again, going to all be pretty much on the same page. I think that the outside force is a plot point rather than really the focus of the movie. I don't think it matters what it is. It's about how scary the situation would be and how unpredictable people get when they're cornered. But the monsters are not the scariest thing in this movie. even close. That woman is so much scarier than any tentacle in this movie. The stabbing of Jessup is scarier than any monster death in the movie as well. I would probably say that. By the way, nobody mentioned this. How cool is it that Brent's death is that he just never comes back? So much scarier than any on-screen death, in my opinion. That they just, him and his posse walk into the mist, and they just aren't in the movie anymore. I thought that was great.
I just wanted to mention the ending in general. Like I mentioned last week, it's one of my favorite endings. I think it's a really great ending to this movie. You get this really somber moment where there's such little dialogue, and you're piecing it all in your head as the audience. You know, you see the sleeping kid. Is he going to kill the kid? Is he not going to? It's just, you get this really, like, it's like one of those moments where you're sitting watching and you just want everything to be silent. Like, because you're so focused on what the hell is going to happen. Remember, there's a very small moment in the movie of just the dad and the son speaking while, like, laying in the middle of the hallway trying to get some sleep. And that's when the son makes him promise that no matter what, under any circumstance, he won't let the monsters get him. And the dad agrees. He agrees, I promise you. And you can kind of see in his eyes at that moment, he's understanding what the son is basically asking him. Like, you know, it may come down to the point where some bad shit may have to happen just to honor this promise to my kid. And this is kind of when he's having his realization of, at this point, I should try to be a better dad and spend more time with my son in these waning moments that we have left of everything that's happening. I should focus time with my son. I personally think he probably did the right thing. Instead of making that kid sit there and suffer, he put himself into that position where I'm going to make it quick and painless for everyone else by forcing himself to die by a monster. And I think the worst part of that scene isn't knowing what's happening. It's seeing the kid wake up. Totally being here with his dad presumably on the other side pointing the gun at him, basically. It's such a whole, like, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. Like, damn, it's so impactful. And then you just have the amazing acting of his dad, like, getting out of the car and falling and just screaming out of pure horror and disgust, like just begging for the monsters to just kill him at that point. And I just think that deserves a moment to talk about that on its own because of how crazy it is. And it's such like I mean, you go through this whole movie to get to that point. It's just like wow, damn, like, you know, you hit a brick wall. And the last thing I wanted to do too, which I've been trying to, I should be writing it down more to keep track, is I kind of like to put my favorite quote in there. I like how this movie had some offhanded humor. Like, there was one scene towards the end when David's talking to Ollie, and Ollie's like, you know, he's like, thank you. And Ollie's like, yeah, I did this because that. And he's like, well, yeah, that's why I said thank you. Like, there's just some really stupid, like, throwaway lines, and the biker guy says some shit to Carmody earlier. But I think my favorite line is when Amanda and Carmody are in the bathroom, and Carmody's praying, and Amanda comes in, and she's like, oh, you know, I just need to use the restroom, but it's a hard time if you want a friend. And she's like, if I needed friends like you, I would just have myself a little squat and shit one right out. And then just walks off.
My two favorite quotes from the movie are both from Jim. He was,
of course they are.
Yeah, right. I told you. I just had this weird Jim thing. He has two great lines in this movie. One of them was when he's arguing with David in the generator room, and he goes, "The next time you got something to say, you better just count your teeth," which I think was a great line. And then the next one is, and he actually, interestingly enough, says it to the religious woman before he joins her side. He must be Italian. He says, your tongue, I might have not exactly written this down exactly, but he says, your tongue must be attached to your mouth in the middle so it can waggle at both ends.
There's two that I like, and both of them include Ollie. When things start to go awry, is like, those of you who aren't local should know Miss Carmody is known in town for being unstable. And the biker says, no shit, what was your first clue? I thought that was just humorous, like,
Yeah.
oh, they're being funny, but at the same time, truthful. And then absolutely takes the cake, 100%, loved it to death. His manager, Bud, is like, for Christ's sake, they were drinking beers off the aisle. He's like, for Christ's sake, Sally, you want me to report you? You want to lose your job? First, I'm going to be taking out names starting with you, and I'm prepared to file a police report. And Ollie goes, fine, write down your names. And Bud goes, I will. And Ollie says, in the greatest way possible, and in the meantime, shut the fuck up and listen. Oh!
So
This movie has qualities that I absolutely love in a horror movie. I love the fact that you're led to believe that there's these dangerous monsters outside and that inside is safe, but it almost seems like the monsters are inside and you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. How are you going to do it and how are you going to live? I think the movie definitely would improve of not seeing the unknown but still being afraid of it. I love character development with a lot of these characters. I do find issue with the way that Brent's character eventually did become and was written out of the movie. I think that there could have been a little bit more because I felt so invested in them attempting to be friendly with one another. The ending is absolutely priceless. I think that it is amazing that the camera is outside of the car. You hear 4 gunshots and then a scream. You said that I can watch it in black and white, so I'm definitely going to do that. That's how the movie was intended, and I'm going to give it a 5. I think the only reason why the movie is taken away from me is because of the CGI and because of the written off character, and I don't feel like it's explored enough. And scary factor, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. I, honest to God, don't know what I would do if, I'm sitting in a mart with no electricity and basically thinking that the entire outside world is dead.
My final thoughts on The Mist. This is not a movie that I dislike. It is a movie that I dislike watching. And there's definitely a distinction to be made there. It does a great job creating a sense of dread, creating a sense of stress and anxiety. And that is something that admittedly I don't particularly enjoy. I'm more of a fun horror kind of guy. This movie, it bums me out and it gets under my skin. Most people would tell you that that's what they're supposed to do. I love the ambiguity of the threat outside while it lasts. I'm a bit disappointed with how much you see once you begin to see it. I find some of the scenes in the movie, especially some of the deaths, to be upsetting. I would even go as far as to say maybe a bit mean-spirited and don't necessarily sit well with me. There's definitely parts of this movie that I don't think are fun. But at the same time, it's definitely a good movie. It's well acted. It has a high production value. I don't blame it for the CGI too much because it's 2007. So I'm going to give the movie a 7. It's really, really good. You guys might find this surprising. The scary movie for this rating for me is a 10. This is a worst case scenario. This is like my greatest fear playing out.
Wow, we got our first 10.
It's not going to come from Sean because he grades on a scale of 1 to 6.
I really like The Mist. It's I'm like I've mentioned before, I'm a huge Stephen King fan, and it's probably a top 5 Stephen King adaptation for me. I think the characters are developed very well. Their interactions with each other are very genuine seeming. The focus on attention to minor details is great in this movie. I really like when movies do that. There's good cinematic moments and horror imagery, like the hand on the glass, the rope, Norm being pulled out. I think there's some really good lasting pieces. It's kind of like Tyler mentioned. I think the monsters are overplayed a little. It contains one of my personal favorite horror endings, probably top 5 horror endings for me personally. I think it's very rewatchable. I know it's hard to watch. It can be very dark and somber at times, but I think the realness of it makes it, enjoyable to rewatch and kind of absorb in everything that's happening. Obviously, it features giant monsters, but kind of like we've mentioned, it's not really the important part of this movie. It's more of a catalyst to get everyone else being monsters on the inside. So with all that being said, I really, really like The Mist. My overall rating is also a 7, which is currently at this point my highest rated film. It's just a very enjoyable horror movie for me. And my scary factor, I'm gonna give it a 4. It has some scary moments, and the reality of it is very scary. But I think there's just watching it, I'm focusing so much on the dynamic between people that I'm not really focused too much on of what's happening scary wise. I will pass to Sean, and he will lead us into what episode 3 will include.
I'm going to bring us back to 1978. It was remade in 2010. It was sequeled in 2019. We spit on your podcast, but she spits on your grave.
Okay. All right. I mean, I suppose it makes sense, right?
I hope everyone enjoyed this episode. I think we had some great debate, some great discussion, but we also agreed on a lot more things than we expected going into this as well, which is cool. I'm glad it worked out well. Thank you for watching episode 2 of I Spit on Your Podcast. Please like, subscribe, share this video with your friends, and definitely comment below. I think this is a great movie where we'd love to hear some people's opinions, not only on The Mist, but on what you think of our podcast going. We're still at a very early stage, and feedback would be absolutely wonderful. And if you are watching, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yo, y'all want drama? Wanna make a scary movie? Rappers coming in with their team and carry toolies. You can jump right out of the screen and barely move me. We hard hitting, directing and starring in it. Y'all want drama? Wanna make a scary movie? Rappers coming in with their team and carry toolies. You can jump right out of the screen and barely move me. We hard